You've probably heard this discussed, but maybe you haven't actually seen what the math actually looks like. And it's this idea of a 2-1 buy down. And a 2-1 buy down is just a really fancy way to say you're having the seller prepay interest. And I'm going to show you the math of how this works. So a 2-1 buy down means that for the first year, the interest rate is 2% lower, 2. For the second year, the interest rate is 1% lower. And then on year 3, it goes to the fully amortized payment, and then you make that payment for 28 more years, right? Now, there may be an opportunity to refinance in the future. There should be an opportunity to refinance in the future because all markets are cyclical. Interest rates go up, interest rates go down. But if you remember from my conversation earlier, we were in basically a 45-year cycle of downward rates, right? That's kind of where we were from the late 70s until about 2021, 2022, where rates were just continuously dropping. And then we saw them start to go up in 2022. So when loan officers are out there telling realtors or clients, oh yeah, we'll just refinance in 6 months, it makes me cringe. There was this big, conversation or social media tag going around about a year ago, like, oh, marry the house and date the rate, right? Just date the rate because you'll be able to refinance in 6 months. Well, we don't know that to be true, right? We don't know that to be true because sometimes these interest rate cycles can take years or even decades to see these big shifts up and down. Now, I will tell you, I have a piece of software where I keep track of my clients so that if there is a momentary dip or a short-term dip in interest rates, which again, a normal 5, 10, 20, 40-year trend line, we'll see a lot of ups and downs, a lot of dips. If we can catch one of those dips, I have a piece of software, a tracking system, a CRM that lets me know, hey, this client originally got their mortgage at 7.37%. At 6.5 might make sense to refinance if we can kind of catch that falling knife when there are these ups and downs, right? But a tool to kind of soften the blow is the 2-1 buy down, meaning that the interest rate is lower by 2% in the first year, lower by 1% in the second year, and then goes to the fully amortized 30-year fixed rate from years 28 and on. And the reason this can be helpful is there's a lot of expenses when you buy a home, right? That first year you get into a home, you have movers, you're painting the place, you're buying all the stuff at Target, IKEA, or Amazon, or Crate and Barrel, or whatever that you need to like put the house together. And so sometimes getting a 2-1 buy down can be enough to make the client feel comfortable, like, all right, at least in my first couple of years of ownership, the payment is lower, right? And in a couple of years, I'll be making more money. I'll have less overhead. I'll feel in a better position. Maybe I do think after a serious conversation with my loan officer, that's me, Scott Groves, maybe there will be an opportunity to refinance into a lower rate in the next couple of years, but let's talk through that. And then I show them this spreadsheet, right? So this is on $1 million purchase. If you notice, all of the data on this is the same, other than what we show here as, let me just annotate this here. Maybe it won't let me annotate. How do I annotate? Highlight. Okay. So here we go. We're doing just like $1 million purchase, right? And we are showing 20% down in all scenarios. But if you notice down here, we're showing this interest rate of 7.875. So this is a consumer that, bad luck, they're buying in October of 2023, and maybe their credit wasn't excellent. So they're getting 7.875, right? Well, in a 2-1 buy down, the first year of homeownership, they can have a rate of 5.875 because the rate is 2% lower. In the second year of homeownership, they can have a rate of 6.875. And then if they don't have an opportunity to refinance, or they don't sell the house, or they don't pay down the mortgage or whatever, their fully amortized rate will go to 7.875 in 2 years. But look at the difference in payments here on $1 million house, right? It's the difference between $4,700 a month in the first year, $5,200 a month in the second year, and then $5,800 a month in the fully amortized payment, which will happen 2 years from now. So in that first year of ownership, we're like, hey, we can give you a slightly lower payment, or a significantly lower payment, that's $1,100 cheaper per month. Now, if you notice down here, the taxes and insurance stay the same, and they still need to know what their full payment is. And I'm having the conversation with the client, hey, we think there's going to be an opportunity to refinance, but I don't know. Are you still comfortable here with this $7,000 payment 2 years from now? If not, it's a non-starter. If you are, then let's talk about how you execute on the 2-1 buy down. And the 2-1 buy down is simply a credit we get from the seller. So let's say, for example, in this scenario, the 2-1 buy down ends up costing about $2,000 per $100,000 borrowed. $2,000 per $100,000 borrowed, right? And so what I would tell this client is like, all right, you're going to buy this house for $1 million. You're putting 20% down. You're getting an $800,000 loan. $2,000 per $800,000. That's about $16,000. Now, if you're the client and you're just paying for this, it's like, well, I can either pay it out of my pocket now, or I could just amortize it over the interest of the loan over the next 2 years. That wouldn't make sense, right? So they don't, meaning Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, the lenders, we as lenders don't allow the client or the realtor to pay for a 2-1 buy down, because that's money that they could have just amortized over the life of the loan instead of paying up front. We do allow the seller to incentivize. We do allow the seller to incentivize people to buy their house by the seller paying for the 2-1 buy down. So let's say, for example, on this, we wanted to tell the client, hey, your interest rate is going to be 2% lower for the first year, 1% lower for the second year. Then you have to be comfortable with the full payment. But the seller is willing to pay for a 2-1 buy down so that you can get that lower interest rate. So one of two things would happen. Either if the seller is motivated to sell this $1 million property to our buyer with an $800,000 loan, the seller could agree, hey, here's $1 million price point. We're going to credit the buyer $20,000 up front to pay for this property for the 2-1 buy down, and we're going to net $980,000. The seller could agree to that. Or if it's a competitive situation where you have to pay $1 million for this property, the buyer could offer $1,020,000, right? So that the seller can still net the same $1 million, but the buyer could offer $1,020,000 with a $20,000 credit back to them to pay for the 2-1 buy down. So what ends up happening is incrementally, the monthly payment goes up about $100 a month because the purchase price is going from $1 million to $1,020,000. But in that first year or two, they're saving, $1,000, $1,100 in the first year in this hypothetical situation, and they're saving about $600 in the second year in this hypothetical situation because they overpaid for the house by $20,000, but then got this as a credit back to them to pay for the 2-1 buy down. So this is why the realtor and the lender needs to be in conversation, in relationship, and checking in more frequently than ever, because with every offer, we might want to have that conversation, me, you, the realtor, and the client. Hey, this property's been on the market for 60 days. We don't think we need to swing for the fences. Let's offer X and then ask for a credit of Y so that they can net, Z price, and we can get this 2-1 buy down paid so that the house is a little bit more affordable the next couple of years. Or we might have the conversation, hey, this property, whether it's at $500,000 in Vegas or $1.5 million in Los Angeles, this property is a really hot commodity. It photographed well. There was 70 people at the open house. We're actually going to have to offer above the list price. And whatever we were going to offer above the list price, let's offer an extra $10, $15, $20, $25,000 than we thought we were going to, but ask for that back to us in the form of a credit so we can pay for this 2-1 buy down. And, buyers, and this is where the emotion comes in, buyers right now are just looking for a win. They're like, hey, they're not saying this out loud consciously, but this is what they're thinking subconsciously. Hey, I had in my mind that I was going to buy this property and the rate was going to be 3%, 4%, 5%. Now you're telling me I'm getting 7.5%. And then the buyer's thinking, okay, well, at least if rates go up and it gets more expensive to buy a house, the prices have to come down, right? Well, no, unfortunately, because there's so little inventory out there and so much property is locked up at that 3% interest rate, like the house I told you about that I own, property values aren't going down because there's not enough supply to force the prices down. So no, you still have to pay full price. And in a lot of markets, you still have to pay over the list price in order to secure a property. Okay, cool. Well, Scott, let's look at my full monthly payment. Oh, hey, bad news. By the way, homeowners insurance is also going up. So it's like buyers are just getting emotionally beaten down. And then we, as lenders and realtors, are like, oh, I wonder why more people don't want to make an offer. So because they're emotionally beat down, right? The buyers need to get a win. So structuring this 2-1 buy down, even if it's like the same net dollars to the seller, you have to offer a little bit more to facilitate the buy down. Even if that's the case, um, it gives the buyer a win, right? It just gives them an emotional win of like, hey, I got a lower cost of ownership for the first couple years. For a lot of buyers, just getting a win, just like getting something in the win column, will help them get over the hump of making offers. And I think this can be really powerful.